So we should get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to this webinar hosted by the American German Institute. I am Dr. Eric Langenbacher, the Senior Fellow and the Director of the Society, Culture, and Politics program. And I'm really pleased to introduce our speaker today, who will be talking about the Freie Wähler, the Free Voters. I'm really happy that we're doing this because, to be honest, I follow German politics very closely myself, and sometimes I'm still at a loss to truly understand what the Free Voters truly stand for and what their policy positions are and things like that. So I'm sure we'll get a lot of really great insight today. Also, of course, the Bavarian state election is coming up on October 8th, so not that long away. The Free Voters are polling pretty well and will likely make it back into the Bavarian Landtag, and will also likely probably be part of the coalition with the Christian Social Union in that state as well. So it's very timely. And we have Dr. Michael Angenendt, who will be speaking today. He is a senior researcher at the Düsseldorf Party Research Institute, where he also earned his PhD. His areas of research and teaching encompass political parties and party systems, elections, and public opinion. He's already been published in a range of journals, including Party Politics, Electoral Studies, and German Politics. He also authored a book on independent local parties and co-wrote a study on European political parties for the European Union. He's been involved in projects on populist parties, as well as more recently, a project on the Free Voters. And I know that he has an open access publication that is a synopsis of that research, which I'm sure he'll talk about in a little bit more detail during his presentation. So Michael, the floor is yours.
Yeah, Eric, thanks for introducing me. So I share my screen. So hope you can all see my presentation. Fine. Okay. Yeah, first of all, a good afternoon to those of you joining us from Baltimore, the US, and a good evening to those joining us from Germany. It's 6 p.m. So I'm delighted to offer you some insights into the Free Voters today. Therefore, my presentation is titled, Who are the Free Voters? After the presentation, which will last approximately 20-25 minutes, I'll be happy to engage in a discussion with you. So, to give you a comprehensive understanding, today's talk will cover several key aspects. We'll kick off with a brief history of the Free Voters, diving into where they stand on the political spectrum, what's their ideology. Then we'll explore why people choose to vote for them and the demographics and political attitudes of their members. The insights I'll share, as Eric already mentioned, are based on several research projects I've conducted with various colleagues over the years, also here at the Düsseldorf Party Research Institute. So I'm really thrilled to offer you not just a look into the Free Voters, but also a glimpse into my own research. The impetus for today's discussion on the Free Voters is a political scandal involving their leader, Hubert Aiwanger. Aiwanger is accused of distributing a clearly anti-Semitic flyer during his school years when he was 17 years old. Also, he denies the allegations, claiming it was his brother who distributed the flyer. His defense has not been really convincing. Adding to the complexity, Aiwanger and his Free Voters have been in a coalition with the Christian Social Union in Bavaria since 2018, with Aiwanger serving as a deputy prime minister of Bavaria. So, as you may know, and Eric already mentioned, the next Bavarian election is just a week, more or less a week away, and Markus Söder, the current prime minister, has decided not to remove Aiwanger from the government, government due to the scandal and to maintain his coalition commitment with the Free Voters, Freie Wähler, for the next legislative period. But this was not Aiwanger's first controversy. He received applause from far-right groups for a speech in June, where he claimed that, I quote, well, we need to take back democracy in Germany. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, he was also a prominent vaccine skeptic and long refused to get vaccinated. And all these serve as a crucial context for understanding the party's current role in the German political landscape. So let's continue with the history of the Free Voters, a brief history and the rise of them. The Free Voters have been a part of Germany's political landscape since the founding years of the Federal Republic of Germany. They have a long-standing tradition in local governance. A stronghold has been particularly in the southern states, in Rhineland-Palatinate, Baden-Württemberg, and Bavaria. And what sets them apart from the other parties is their unique status in local politics as independent localists. So from a legal point of view, they don't compete as a traditional political party in local elections. Initially, their focus was solely on local and to some extent on regional elections. They were not a national player from the beginning on. But we see a 21st century shift. Ever since the beginning of this century, they've been participating more frequently in state elections, especially in the southern states. And this makes the Free Voters an interesting example of a bottom-up political organization in Germany. They started at the local level, expanded to the regional, and eventually formed into a political party to participate in federal elections. Having a look on their rise. The first significant breakthrough came in 2008 when they entered the Bavarian state parliament for the first time. And since 2018, they've been governing in Bavaria as a junior partner of the Christian Social Union. In the 2021 federal election, they garnered nearly 3% of the votes, making them the largest extra-parliamentary opposition in Germany. In other milestones here, they also entered the Rhineland-Palatinate State Parliament in 2021 and won 2 seats in the last European elections. So, looking ahead, if any smaller parties are likely to enter the Bundestag of the German national parliament in the next election, it seems most likely to be the Free Voters, possibly at the expanse of the Christian Democratic or Christian Social Union, the German conservatives. So, as you can see, the Free Voters have come a long way, and the journey offers some interesting insights into the landscape of German politics, I guess. So, let's move on to the ideology and their position in the political spectrum. I would say at its core, the Free Voters present themselves as some kind of non-political, independent and citizen-oriented alternative to the established parties. They distance themselves from the traditional party model, criticizing parties for being out of touch with everyday citizens. And this is also reflected in their name, Free Voters, Freie Wähler. What means free? Right? It implies that they are not bound by any particular ideology. Instead, having the common good in mind, the other parties only represent particular interests, green, social democratic, or liberal views, which is seen negatively by the Free Voters. They emphasize their closeness to citizens and their commitment to local and regional issues, especially, which is a key part of their appeal. Yeah. However, recent studies, Eric mentioned, have shown that the Free Voters do take political stances in party competition like the other political parties. Our studies also reveal that their programmatic focus is anchored clearly in the conservative political spectrum. So despite their self-presentation as a non-political, apolitical, they are less so than one might initially think. So in summary, Free Voters are a complex political actor that combines I would say a non-ideological facet with underlying conservative tendencies, making them a unique player in the German political landscape. Let's focus in more detail on the Free Voters' ideological positioning in German party competition. They are situated, as you can see, in the top right quadrant, holding center-right and moderate conservative economic views. And this places them very close to the Christian Democrats or the Christian Social Union in both economic and cultural dimensions in party competition. I would say, in fact, they are only slightly more right-leaning economically than the Christian Social Union, a bit more liberal on the cultural dimension of party competition. Now, when we compare them to the radical right populist party, the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, they are closer in economic terms, but are less conservative on the social cultural dimension, setting them apart from the far right party in Germany. And this puts the Free Voters, as you can see clearly, in a contested ideological space, especially at the federal level. And this contested position, I would say, could be one reason why they haven't been as successful in federal elections as they have been at the local and state levels. Their ideological proximity to major parties like the Christian Democrats, as well as their distinction from the Alternative for Germany, places them in a competitive landscape, making it challenging to carve out a unique space. So let's delve into another interesting aspect, I would say, of the Free Voters, namely their anti-establishment stance. As you can see here in the figure, the Free Voters adopt a clear anti-establishment position, questioning the ability of political elites to adequately represent the population, the whole citizens. While they are, as you also can see, not as extreme in this regard as the far-right AfD, they are quite, as we call it in our paper, they are quite anti-establishmentarian, similar to the left party, the German left party, which is on the left wing of the political spectrum in Germany. So after examining their ideological positioning and anti-establishment stance in the German political landscape, the question arises, why do citizens vote for the Free Voters? My colleagues and I have analyzed this question, investigating the political orientations and attitudes that favor voting for the Free Voters. So if you're interested, I'd like to draw your attention to a recent publication in the Political Science Quarterly, the Politische Vierteljahresschrift, titled The Free Voters, a Decent Alternative for Conservatives. And it's published a few weeks ago, and it's available open access. So that was a commercial break. So why do people vote for the Free Voters? Our research has shown that the party has a strong appeal in the conservative spectrum. The likelihood of someone voting for the Free Voters decreases if there's a significant distance between the individuals and the party's position on socioeconomic as well as socio-cultural issues. And therefore, the party's greatest potential, voter potential, lies with former Christian Democratic voters, but they also have a secondary appeal among conservative, social democratic, or liberal voters. The FDP, the Free Democratic Party in Germany. Interestingly, the free voters are more electable in rural regions than in contrast to bigger cities. Here, however, dissatisfaction with democracy on the side of the voters is a motivator, but only significant in our analyses for a narrower group of potential voters. Specifically, the free voters seem to appeal to those who are, I would call it, moderately dissatisfied with democracy. Those who are extremely dissatisfied are clearly more likely to turn to the radical right populist AfD. Now, here's a catch. The free voters are, as you see in the previous figure, in a niche, which could explain their limited success at the national level, I would say. This niche might be too small for future success. So, regarding the recent scandals I mentioned in the beginning, in the introduction, involving their leader, Hubert Aiwanger, our analyses suggest that the free voters have largely tapped into the pool of voters dissatisfied with democracy. The scandals might not significantly expand their vote base, which is more motivated by conservative views and a high acceptance of democratic structures in Germany, rather than anti-establishment or anti-party or anti-establishment sentiments. So therefore, the scandals could risk not fully tapping into their potential voter base. We will see next week. So let's now turn our attention to the member structure of the free voters, answering the question, who are the members of this party? The data I'm sharing now comes from a 2018 publication summarizing a recent research project, by the Düsseldorf Party Research Institute. So, firstly, the gender distribution is overwhelmingly male, with over 70% of the members being men. This is quite similar to the gender distribution in other established German parties like the Christian Democrats or the Social Democrats. When it comes to age, the majority of members fall within the 50 to 64 bracket, making up almost half of the total membership. This is notably higher than in other German parties, where only a third belong to this age group. In terms of occupations, the free voters primarily represent the new middle class. So over 60% of the members are employees or civil servants. As for social class, the majority identifies themselves as belonging to the middle class, with variations in the upper and lower middle class. This distribution clearly resembles that of the members of other established parties like Christian Democrats or Christian Social Union. So, last but not least, let's have a look on the political attitudes of the members towards other parties represented in the Bundestag. It's clear that criticism prevails. As we find out, over 55% of the members hold a skeptical or critical, I would say, negative attitude or negative view of the other parties represented in the German Bundestag, while less than a third of the members have a favorable or even enthusiastic attitude. And I would say this aligns well with the anti-party rhetoric that the free voters themselves employ in their political communication and the self-description. What's even more striking is when we compare these attitudes to those in the general population in Germany. The highest level of party criticism of negative attitudes to the established parties, regularly measured in opinion polls, with the highest level of party criticism recorded in Germany since 1994 was 45%. So this is still significantly lower than the criticism we see among the free voter members, underscoring the distinctiveness of the party base. So, however, our survey also reveals an, I would say, important nuance. While the free voters members may be dissatisfied with how democracy functions in day-to-day politics, they almost anonymously believe that democracy is the best form of government. In this sense, they can be described as critical Democrats, critical of the functioning of democracy in everyday politics, but still fundamentally committed to it as a form of governance. And this at least strongly suggests that the members of the free voters are distinctly different from the radical right alternative for Germany, much like we were able to show for their voters. So, to sum it up, we've seen that the political scandal surrounding the leader of the free voters, Hubert Aiwanger, sets the stage for the Q&A discussion, maybe for a webinar today. The free voters have their roots in local politics and are now also striving for influence at the federal level. Ideologically, they present themselves as a apolitical or non-political alternative that is not guided by any political ideologies, but by the common good. Also, they are clearly anchored in the conservative spectrum. Their voter base mainly consists of moderately dissatisfied citizens and conservatives. The membership structure is predominantly male, middle-aged, and middle class. So despite a general skepticism or criticism towards the established parties, both the members and the voters of the free voters are committed to democracy and can be described as critical Democrats. So last but not least, the party faces the challenge of existing in a competitive niche market and dealing with a general dissatisfaction with democracy. So I'm now looking forward to the discussion and your questions. The literature. Thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you so much. That was an extremely informative presentation, and I've already learned an awful lot. I would like to invite any of our attendees. If you have a question, please type it into the Q&A or to the chat function, and then I can collect and pose the questions to Michael. But maybe I'll start with a couple of questions myself, maybe getting down into some of the details a little bit more. So the free voters have had their most success in, or their greatest success in Bavaria. They've been in the government since 2018. So what do you think? I mean, it's one thing to have a platform and to make speeches. It's another thing when you actually share governmental power and can affect, policy outcomes. So what do you think have been their biggest successes since they've been in the government? Or maybe not, maybe success is the wrong word, but that's a little kind of value laden, but what has their biggest impact been?
Eric, thank you for this interesting question. I would say my answer is twofold. First, the impact on the national level of German politics goes far behind what is happening, what is still happening in Bavaria. Let me say, anti-establishment stance, the anti-establishment political communication, especially from the leader Hubert Aiwanger, is what has made them prominent much behind the borders of Bavaria. This is the first big impact. Second, when we have a look at their policy positions, we have to recognize that they started, at least at the beginning of the Federal Republic, in local politics, and then later go on at state to run on state elections. And that's a unique focus, what makes them distinctiveness. So they focus on clearly regional issues, and it's prominent. Yeah, they, for example, tackle the economic and also ecological issues, but mainly on a regional level. And to put these issues, these clearly regional issues, into the public, I would say this has big impact. The Free Voters make in Bavaria. Yeah, the strong focus on clearly regional issues, but in various dimensions. Yeah.
All right, I see we're having a couple of questions. So let's start with a question from Carol Hager. Have the Freie Wähler taken a public position on their willingness to enter a coalition government at any level with the AfD? It seems like they would oppose this, but have they declared what their formal stance would be?
So interesting, yeah. I would say at least now they will refuse to enter any coalition or working together with a far-right AfD. Our paper is titled, "Are the Free Voters a decent alternative?" Yeah, and it's no surprise that they choose the word decent alternative in their manifesto for the last federal election, as they play with these distinctiveness, being in a space, in a political space between the far-right AfD on one side and the conservatives, the Christian Democrats. And I would say this would that they will not profit in any way from joining an alliance with a far-right AfD. Because their unique brand, their unique position is to distance themselves on the one side from these radical right rhetoric, from these radical positions, but also trying to get dissatisfied conservative voters. So I'm quite sure that they will refuse any coalition or working together with a far-right AfD in the near future. I'm pretty sure, yeah.
All right, I'd actually like to follow up on those points just a little bit more before I get back to some of our other questions. And I guess the overarching question is, how institutionalized are the Free Voters today? And I bring that up because it's a very interesting profile of your typical AfD member and voter that you kind of mentioned. And you mentioned that most of their appeal is going to come from former CDU voters, but also some of the SPD and FDP. You also mentioned that they're critical Democrats, right? They're moderately critical towards the functioning of democracy. But I guess my question is that a kind of a position, a niche that they're going to be able to defend going forward? And if not, where would these voters go? Right. I mean, speaking from the United States on, a day that will probably lead to the closing of the US government for God knows how long. Right. And we've seen the unprecedented radicalization of one of our two parties. Are these voters that could become more radicalized and move towards the AfD, or would they go back to voting CDU, CSU?
I don't think that it's a tricky question. I don't think that they that these voters will let me think about it.
I mean, if I can just pop in for a second with some of my thoughts. So I think that obviously the media, the right-wing media and social media in particular, have really aided and abetted the radicalization of, so many people on the right or previously on the center right in this country. And I would hope that maybe with more stringent controls over some of these things in the German and European context, that might limit the radicalization potential of these particular voters. But I mean, it's shocking to everybody that the AfD is polling over 20% right now. In Bavaria, with the election coming up, I saw that they're neck and neck with both the Greens and the Free Voters there. So there seems to be some radicalization that's happening amongst the German rhetoric, or I'm sorry, the German electorate, and I don't know. It would be cause for concern from my perspective, at least.
That's I would say it's a fine line as the Free Voters are walking. Our studies have shown that they appeal to those who are moderately dissatisfied. So Aiwanger and his party, therefore, they have to be careful not to overreach. So on the one hand, they aim to win conservative voters from the union parties, from the Social Democrats and the Free Democratic Party, while on the other, they need to credibly distinguish themselves from the radical right, AfD, in their political communication. I would say these scandal and the allegations of anti-Semitism, for example, pose a risk of alienating conservative voters. So also implying, as I mentioned in my presentation, implying that we live in a non-democratic state. When Aiwanger said we need to take back democracy, it is problematic. So whether the Free Voters can, let me say, successfully navigate this will likely be, I would say, a determining factor for their future success, including the federal level. So many see the Free Voters, as I've shown, as an alternative to the union parties. Yeah, but the last allegations of anti-Semitism could be a deal breaker for some voters, pushing them maybe back to the Christian Social Union. And the allegations of anti-Semitism, could risk allying the public perception of the Free Voters that they are too closely to the far right AfD. And it's a fine line for the Free Voters, and we'll see where the journey goes on.
Well, that was a very optimistic take. I remember seeing in the media how the Free Voters and Aiwanger in particular went up in popularity after this anti-Semitic incident. So we shall see. So let's get back to some of our questions, which are piling up, which is great. And I'm going to maybe try to connect a couple. Here we have one about the perception of a general swing to the center right in German politics at the local level. Do you think that local politics has moved in that direction? And if so, why would that be the case? And then kind of related to that, so you mentioned how they're strong in rural areas, but how strong are they?
The first part of the question, for other scientists, it's hard to say if there's a general trend in local politics, because local politics is so different depending on whether we look at rural regions or the bigger cities, the municipalities. So I see no clear shift here overall for German local politics. What makes local politics distinctive in Germany from the higher levels of the German political system is that many citizens think that local politics is not like big politics. It's like the regional or federal stage. So on the local level, it's more important. Personality is more important than ideology. And that's a reason why they are really successful at the local level. Giving you an example, These independent local lists I mentioned in my presentation, of course, they encompass more than only the free voters, but politicians from these independent local lists means politicians are not bound by any of the national parties. They actually hold more than half of the seats in all German local councils. So adding up all the seats in German local politics. So they're really successful. And that's the core, and it was the beginning of the free voter success. So they are strongly anchored, especially in rural regions. One reason for this, as I've shown in my PhD, is that we also now parties are losing members. So it's hard for the established parties in the Bundestag to maintain in each of these rural regions local branches. And that's where the free voters and other local lists tap in and fill these gaps. And I would say that might be also a reason why the party of the free voters in Bavaria, where we see a lot of rural regions in contrast to here in North Rhine-Westphalia, where I live. So that's why I'm so successful in the southern states, in Bavaria, Rhineland-Palatinate, in Baden-Württemberg. We have here a lot of small towns where party ideology is not the first or most important determinant for voting behavior in local elections.
All right, well, then to double down on that point, we have another question here about specific examples of local and regional issues that have been important for the free voters. So agriculture, roads, energy costs, schools, taxes. I know that they led the kind of opposition to reducing the years in gymnasium in Bavaria, if memory serves. And weren't they also against the road tax that people would have to pay for road improvements or something like that? But are those kind of typical issues? If not, what do they usually get involved with?
Yeah, you already mentioned pretty good examples for what is important in local politics. Also at the state level, the German land level, for example, education policies. Yeah? They also promote direct democracy at the state level, for example, in Bavaria, which makes them distinctiveness. They focus on how to renew streets, renew school buildings, and that it's not a political issue. We should maintain streets, yeah, and it doesn't matter if you are social, if you have a social democratic or conservative view, yeah. Schools have to be fine, the buildings have to be fine, and this is not a matter of party politics. Yeah, it's a matter of, I would say, common good. Everyone could agree with, no matter where you stand on politically. And I would say this is what they focus on in their communication. And yeah, these are agriculture, mobility, ecological policies. Yeah, quite a good range of topics addressed in local politics, I would say.
And that actually flows really nicely into the next question, which is to move back to their federal ambitions. So would these types of issues and policy positions be a basis of some kind of national profile?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, what would their national profile be? Because it's really interesting. One of my takeaways from your presentation thus far is the dilemma that the free voters are kind of stuck in, right? That, I guess I have a much better understanding now of how resonant they've been in the local context, but it still surprises me they've been able to kind of scale that up to do as well as they have in Bavaria, maybe Rheinland-Pfalz and Brandenburg and places like that. But it's really difficult for me to see how that then translates, up to the federal level as a policy platform. It's like, what's the point? I mean, I see their point at the local, maybe to a lesser extent the state level, but why would this resonate? What would resonate at the national level.
Yeah. They, in contrast, for example, for the AfD, which is prominent for their anti-migration policies. If you have the AfD in mind, the first policy is, of course, it's migration. Having a look at the Free Voters, there's no single issue what you could attribute to the Free Voters. They have a wide range of policy stances instead of a single issue, and their focus is to be, let me say, a bit more, the strategy, I would say, is to be a bit more conservative than the Christian Democratic or Christian Social Union Party on the cultural dimension and also on the economic dimension. Having a look at what do the conservatives, and they try to pick up these topics with a slightly different nuance and slightly different position to the right side of the political spectrum, but I would say slightly more to the right.
Well, that's a very difficult niche to fill and to kind of pull off. Our next question is going to move to a regional focus on Eastern Germany. There's a really fascinating question here because we know that I think they have a couple of seats in the Brandenburg Landtag, although they're allied with another kind of civic group there. But what about the rest of Eastern Germany? I mean, we know that the AfD is polling first in at least 3, if not 4, of the Eastern states. But except for Brandenburg, it seems that the Free Voters are not, they don't have too much of a presence. So why do you think that is, especially if we think about Saxony and Thuringia? And is there, I don't know, space for them to make some inroads in some of those Eastern states?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this is a really interesting question because I mentioned previously that in rural regions, they have more success than in bigger cities, in the mid-sized or bigger cities. And in East Germany, we have a lot of these rural regions. So why are they not as successful as in Bavaria, in Rhine-Palatinate, or in Baden-Württemberg? This is really interesting. I would say one answer, or one part of the answer is that in Eastern Germany, we're maybe also in a state of, as Tori mentioned, polarized pluralism. And that society, as well as the party system in Eastern Germany, is much more polarized than in Western Germany. The left party on the left fringe of the political spectrum, the AfD on the right side of the political spectrum is very strong. And this we see is in Thuringia makes it really hard for the center left or center right parties to get votes. And I would say this is also the reason why it's so hard for the Free Voters to get success in Eastern Germany. Yeah? They are too moderate, too less populism in contrast to the Alternative for Germany and the Left Party. I've shown the figure with a level of anti-establishmentarianism, as we call it. You see AfD is on the top, followed by the Left Party, and then the Free Voters. But in Eastern Germany, these two parties on the right and on the left have, I would say, undoubtedly successful managed to get voters. And it's really hard to tap in for the Free Voters because for these kind of voters, they are, I would say, too moderately anti-establishment. It's hard. Yeah, I would say this is one part of the answer, an important part of the answer.
All right, and then we have a question also that the Free Voters have several top candidates with a migration background, while the CDU seems to be relatively unable to gain people and candidates with such a background. So what do you think is going on with that? And also, if I can tack something onto that while you think about your response. I mean, I think that you rightfully pointed out that the AFD's single issue, I mean, they have other issues, right? But the one big issue is immigration. And I think that Aiwanger and the Free Voters have been, you know, skeptical of, you know, immigration as well. So, you know, what's, I guess, what's their profile or what's their stance more generally on immigration, multiculturalism, et cetera?
Yeah. You mentioned that they have also candidates with a with different backgrounds. Yeah, that's true. 3 days ago, there was another comparably small scandal because one of the candidates in Bavaria posted on X, or formerly Twitter, some anti-Semitic posts. And I was asked, are they now a far right party? I would say no, these are exceptions from the rule. But it's hard to say. I have to admit, I have no data about the profile of the recent candidates running for the election in Bavaria. So I just could speculate, and that's not what I want as a scientist. I would like to draw my conclusion on data, and I have to admit, I'm sorry, I have no recent data concerning the profile of the actual candidates in Bavaria. Immigration, you mentioned, yeah, of course they have. They are clearly less. They clearly promote less strong anti-immigration policies in contrast to the in comparison to the alternative for Germany. And this is, as you mentioned, of course, also an important topic for the Free Voters. But in contrast, also the AFD have a range of other policy issues and positions. But the salience of the anti-immigration topic is most important from the AFD. The Free Voters distinguish them from the AFD in 2 points. Their anti-immigration stances is less radical, clearly less radical, and they do not promote it in such a strong way like the alternative for Germany. It's less salient. If we have a look at their election program, of course, they mention this topic, but yeah, it's less radical and it's less prominent, less salient, I would say.
Or we have a couple of final questions, but I would like to put one of my own in for a second while we're on the topic of different, you know, policy stances. You know, in addition to being anti-immigrant, the AFD is also against, what do they call it, the gender Wahnsinn, so kind of what they call gender ideology. And despite some prominent leaders that are members of the LGBTQ plus community, the AFD also seems to support quite a few homophobic policy positions as well. So do the Free Voters have a stance on gender issues as well as issues pertaining to the LGBTQ plus community?
And the party as a whole is not promoting homophobic issues like the AFD. It's something we can clearly say. But they are, I would say, they wouldn't use the word gender ideology, for example, in their political communication. Yeah, they're of course not homophobic, we can say, but they do not try to address the LGBTQ community. Of course, they are clearly on the right side of the political spectrum. That's of course not their voter base, we can say. Yeah, it's not their voter base. They do not push these topics forward. They are skeptical. I would say a bit skeptical pushing these topics forward, but they also here clearly distinguish from at least from the rhetoric, from the clear homophobic rhetoric of the far right AFD. Now here in this way, they are, I would say, positioned in the center of the political spectrum regarding this issue, special issue.
All right, well, we're starting to approach the end of our allotted time. but we have a great question returning to Bavaria for a second. And, so during this anti-Semitic pamphlet scandal, the CSU minister-president of Bavaria, Söder, supported Aiwanger and has talked repeatedly about how he would like to continue this coalition in the future. And I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because, tactically, that could be a real mistake, especially if a lot of the supporters of the Free Voters are potentially or former CSU voters. So why do you think that Söder is taking this particular kind of stance, which might be causing his party to lose some votes?
Yeah, I would say Söder made a mistake to clearly rule out a potential coalition with the Green Party after the election. So if he won't maintain government, he is more or less forced to continue a coalition with the Free Voters. And it's really, really risky to quit the actual coalition, because this is the only option for the Christian Social Union, for Markus Söder, to maintain, in fact, maybe one of the only options to maintain in government after the next election, because he clearly ruled out a coalition. He said the Green Party is the enemy here in Bavaria. Knowing the whole story now and these scandals, I would think also Söder maybe would agree that, knowing the story now, it was a mistake to clearly rule out a potential coalition with the Green Party. So now he's forced to stay on with the Free Voters. That's it, yeah.
Well, maybe he isn't the brilliant party strategist or tactician that he would like people to think that he is. But we'll see. Yeah. All right. Well, we have no more questions, and we're almost at the limit of our time. So I would like to thank Michael Angenendt one more time for spending this last hour or so with us and providing such fruitful insight into the Free Voters, especially right before the Bavarian election. So thank you very much. And thanks to all of our attendees. We will do more podcasts and webinars soon, including a podcast after the Bavarian election with our own kind of analysis. So thank you, Michael.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you, and for the nice discussion and for the interesting questions. Really great. Thank you.